Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm hoping that the other board members will join us and you can promote them, moderator, as I do my introductory remarks. Welcome to the October 4th, 2022 Enforcement and Compounding Committee meeting. My name is Maria Serpa. I'm chairperson of this committee. Before we convene, I'd like to remind everyone present that the board is a consumer protection agency charged with administering and enforcing pharmacy law. Where protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. This meeting is being conducted consistent with the provisions of Government Code 11133. Participants watching the webcast will only be able to observe the meeting. Anyone interested in participating in the meeting must join the WebEx meeting. Information and instructions are posted on our website. As I facilitate this meeting, I will announce when we are accepting public comment. I have advised the meeting moderator to allot 3 minutes for each individual providing comments. This approach is necessary to facilitate this meeting and to ensure the committee has the opportunity to complete its necessary business. I would like to ask staff monitoring the meeting to provide a general instruction to the members of the public participating via WebEx. Moderator?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we get started, I would like to remind committee staff or committee members and staff who are not speaking to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will interject with a brief friendly reminder or simply mute the microphones. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature, also referred to as the Q&A panel. When the committee chair reaches a point at the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, public comment will be requested. Please note that the Q&A feature is not being used as a means for members of the public to represent, or it's only being used for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. Once given permission to unmute, the member of the public may unmute themselves and verbally state their comment. The Q&A feature is not to be used for typing out questions or for committee members to communicate with one another. And with that, I return the meeting and floor back to you, Committee Chair.
Thank you. I'd now like to take a roll call to establish a quorum. Members, as I call your name, please open your line before speaking. Jig Patel.
Licensing member present.
Thank you. Renee Barker. I don't see Renee. Indira Cameron Banks. I don't see her either. Perhaps staff could reach out to the two of them to see if they're just going to be joining us late. Sung Oh.
Here.
Thank you. Ricardo Sanchez.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum has been established. Okay. Members, as we begin today, I would like to thank you and members of the public for your time and participation at today's meeting. I also ask everyone participating to be respectful of the work before the committee today. We encourage participation by members of the public throughout the meeting at appropriate times. The committee respectfully requests that when comments are provided, they are done so in a professional manner consistent with how the board conducts its business. Let's move on to our first agenda item, which is public comment for items not on the agenda. As we open up this section of the meeting for items not on the agenda, I'd like to remind members of the public that you are not required to identify yourself, but you may do so. I would also like to remind everyone on the committee that we're not able to take action on these items except to decide whether to place an item on a future agenda. Members, following the public comments for this item, I will ask you for comment on what, if any, items should be placed on a future agenda. As a reminder, this agenda item is not intended to be a discussion, but rather an opportunity for members of the committee and members of the public to request consideration of items for future placement on an agenda. At that time, at the future meeting, that's when discussion will take place. Moderator, we're ready for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment.
I don't see any public comment.
I
Oh.
do not either. Oh,
One just popped in.
yes, you conjured it. So we have an individual with the name of Edward Conway that would like to make a comment. And Edward, when I give you permission, you will be able to unmute yourself. All right, Edward, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes. I'll give you a 10-second warning. And you're unmuted. Oh, he was unmuted. Hold on. Edward, try unmuting yourself again, please.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to place on the future agenda a request that the board clarify its position with respect to using the 503A and the 503B bulks list given by the FDA for compounding of bulk drug substances unapproved by the FDA.
Thank you.
All right, and I see no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes.
Okay.
So committee members, the request is to add the bulk list for the FDA for 503A and 503B to a future agenda item. For background, we have discussed this as a part of USP, and we do have USP discussions coming up also. So what's the pleasure of the committee's members? Would you like to discuss this individually as a agenda item in the future, or have it be continue to be a part of our USP discussion that's coming up?
Good morning.
Maria, I'm okay. Just leaving it up to your discretion. I don't have preference.
Yes, Maria, I was going to state that, I feel that USP discussion would embody that, so it could be just one discussion.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3, which is approval of the August 25th, 2022 committee meeting minutes. Included in attachment 1 of the meeting materials are the draft minutes for the committee's meeting in August. Members, as we begin, do you have any questions or comments on the draft minutes? As a part of your comments, I would also entertain a motion if you believe such an action is appropriate.
I would like to make a motion to accept the minutes from August 25, 2022 meeting.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll second that, Ricardo.
Ricardo, thank you. With a motion and a second on the floor, I'll now open the discussion for public comment. Moderator, can you open the discussion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment.
Seeing none, I think we're ready to close it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've closed the Q&A.
Okay. With the motion and second and no public comment received, I'll now take a roll call vote. Jake Patel.
Yes.
Sung Oh.
Yes.
Ricardo Sanchez.
Yes.
And just to confirm, Renee and Indira have not joined us as yet?
I see Indira on the list now.
Oh, great. Renee and Indira, were you able to review the minutes and are you able to vote?
Yes, I vote yes.
That's Renee?
Yes. Indira.
Indira votes yes. And Renee?
Yeah, this is Renee. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And I vote yes.
And the chair votes yes, motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 4. Discussion and consideration of regulations of surgical clinics pursuant to Business and Professions Code 4190. Members, we are continuing the discussion on several items that we talked about at our last meeting in August. First of which is the discussion on the regulation of surgical clinics, this agenda item. The meeting materials again include several relevant sections of pharmacy law covering the regulation of surgical clinics, which is defined in Business and Professions Code, section 4190. As specified in this section, a surgical clinic licensed by the board may purchase drugs at wholesale for administration from a commingled drug supply to patients registered for care at the clinic. Further, the law specifies in Business and Professions Code 4192 that a surgical clinic is required to retain a consultant pharmacist to jointly approve policies and procedures used by the surgical clinic. Further, a consulting pharmacist is required to visit the clinic regularly and at least quarterly to review the operations and certify in writing that the clinic is operating in compliance with legal requirements. The written certification shall be kept on file in the clinic for 3 years and shall include recommended corrective actions if appropriate. The meeting materials provide some background on the committee's policy prior discussion, including direction provided to staff after considering policy questions. So if you looked at the meeting materials, it kind of summarizes what we talked about at our last meeting. In addition, following our last meeting, inspector staff performed some inspections of surgical clinics to provide further information to our committee as a part of our policy considerations. I want to thank the board inspectors who were able to provide us with additional information to understand the scope of the potential concerns in surgical clinics. The meeting materials include inspection findings, including the most frequent discussion items and orders of corrections issued. The findings appear to support that there is a need to further refine the board's regulation of surgical clinics. And I continue to support the development of a self-assessment process to help facilitate compliance. Consistent with our discussion from last month, we have attachment 2. Attachment 2 includes draft statutory language developed for our consideration today. As a reminder, surgical clinics renew their license on an annual basis. As proposed to be amended, renewal requirements would be amended to include confirmation of compliance with quarterly inspections by the consultant pharmacist. Further, as a part of the renewal, every odd number year, the renewal would also include submission of the most recent self-assessment. Additionally, as proposed, the statute would also amend to establish the self-assessment required itself. Consistent with our discussion in August, not last month, but our last meeting in August, the self-assessment frequency would be consistent with other license types. Members, you can see the draft statutory language on the screen. I believe it is consistent with our prior discussion. Do you have any questions or comments on the draft proposal? I would entertain a motion if we have no discussion. Oh, thank you. This is the second part, which specifically talks about, that's on the screen, that talks about the self-assessment and the requirement to turn in the self-assessment during the renewal process. This will allow us to assure compliance. Members, do you have any comments or motion to offer?
Hi, Maria, this is Jay.
Maria,
Go ahead, Sung, sorry.
oh no, I was just gonna make a motion, but just also confirming, is this the language sufficient to call out just surgical clinic? Is that what we're doing? Because they're not separated licensee types, correct?
Anne or Eileen can answer that. My understanding is this section of BMP code is for surgical clinics.
Yes, that's correct. The 4190 series is specific for that.
Okay, I can make a motion to pursue statutory change or rulemaking as displayed on the agenda.
This is Jig. I'll second that.
Thank you. Members, any further comment before we go to public comment?
I think this is one slide ahead. Am I think this is?
This should be number 4. Sorry, you are correct. Thank you, Jig. Was the slide did not have the motion?
It did. Number 4 was the motion.
No, this is not it. This is outsourcing. So this is 5.
Because
so number 4, we don't have a slide for the motion?
So there's not, I believe that the motion was to pursue a statutory change to amend sections 4190 and 4192 as presented.
And allow the EO and the board president to work on specific language?
Yeah, so generally when it's statutory, because of the nature of legislation, the board already has policy in this area. So I don't know that additional delegation is necessary, but if you want to include that in the motion, it certainly does not help.
Eileen, I see you're trying to chime in.
Yeah. Hi, Chair Serpa. This is Eileen Smiley. How about I make a stab at the motion, and it would be to recommend to the board pursuing statutory changes to Business and Professions Code Section 4204, 4192 as it relates to surgical clinics as reflected in the board materials. Would that be your motion, President O?
That sounds good. Thank you, everyone, for helping us out. Appreciate that.
So just to be clear, that's section 4190 and 4192. Correct, Eileen? Smiley?
Eileen's probably confirming.
That was what was displayed on the previous screen, was those 2 sections.
I see 4190.
Yeah, so both are included in the meeting materials. They're 2 separate slides, 4190 and then 4192.
Correct. So those are the 2 sections that we are amending. So is that clear in the motion and the second? Are you both okay with that?
Absolutely.
Yes, this is Jig. I seconded.
Great. All right. Thank you for helping clarify that. Let's go to public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or else you may simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, I see no raised hands or requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Please do. Thank you.
You're welcome.
With a motion on the floor and no public comment received, let's take a roll call vote. Jig Patel.
Yes.
Renee Barker.
Yes.
Indira Cameron Banks.
Yes.
Sung Oh.
Yes.
Ricardo Sanchez.
Yes.
And chair votes yes, motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item number 5. Discussion and consideration of potential draft regulations, including self-assessment form relating to outsourcing facilities. Members, this was another item that we discussed at our previous meeting. During our August meeting, in responses to changes of the law from January of this year, the board released FAQs providing guidance to outsourcing facilities that intended to dispense patient-specific prescriptions in California. At the end of the FAQ is a link to the board's pharmacy self-assessment form. So the pharmacy self-assessment or the general pharmacy self-assessment form that was provided as another tool for outsourcers to use to aid them in understanding the relevant provisions of law related to dispensing of medications that are required when dispensing patient-specific medications. As you may recall, during our last meeting, staff provided concept regulation language and conceptual self-assessment form for the outsourcing category. Since this last meeting, staff and council have refined the proposal, which is included in attachment 3. I've reviewed the materials and I'm comfortable with the updated regulation text and the draft self-assessment form, and be interested in hearing your thoughts and would entertain a motion if you think we should move forward. Members?
I don't want to be hoarding all the motions here, but I make a motion to pursue regulatory change as displayed on the slide.
Thank you.
I'll second that. It's Ricardo.
Ricardo is a second. Having a first and second, are there any other member comments? Right, seeing none, let's go to public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm opening up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and send it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand via our displaying instructions, and we'll give you a moment. All right, we have a request for comment from Edward Conway. And Edward, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, hello. Could the board clarify how this differs from all of the FDA requirements and how this checklist form adds on to the FDA requirements, or essentially, is it redundant? That's basically what my question is.
Thank you for your question. I'll take a stab at it, but then Eileen or someone on the staff may like to assist also. And just for in the background material is when this law was passed allowing outsourcers to provide patient-specific prescriptions, the board was asked to provide guidance to assist them. And so we prepared FAQs, and part of the FAQ response was that was not enough, that additional guidance was needed. And so this is our attempt to provide additional guidance to licensees so that they know what the California specific laws are. Eileen or Ann, do you have any additional comments?
This is Eileen Smiley. Chair Serper, I think you covered that quite right, because it's California just recently allowed, as you said, outsourcing facilities to do patient-specific prescriptions to California residents, and this would address that. The federal rules do not.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Please do, thank you.
You're welcome.
Having a motion on the floor and public comment received, let's take a roll call vote. Jik Patel.
Yes.
Renee Barker.
Yes.
Indira Cameron Banks.
Yes.
Sung Oh.
Yes.
Ricardo Sanchez.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, motion passes. Well, I just want to make an editorial comment after these last two potentially complex subjects. I appreciate the board's diligence. We had a robust discussion at our previous meeting that allowed us to perform an analysis of the information that was provided to us by staff in a really fast manner today. So I appreciate the board's attention to this. Our next item is agenda item 6. Discussion and consideration of proposed change to board's citation and fine authority related to unlicensed activity. Members, this next item is also a continuation of our discussion from the August meeting. The meeting materials again include some of the general provisions of the board's citation and fine program. As a brief reminder, during our last meeting, we discussed the patient risk associated with unlicensed activity, including the potential distribution of adulterated products. We also determined that the board's current maximum fine authority is not sufficient to address unlicensed activities. After the August meeting, staff developed a possible statutory proposal for our consideration. This language is included in attachment 4. The language establishes the same approach as the fine provisions that we already have established in 4126.5C. I'm comfortable with the draft proposal and would like to emphasize that not all unlicensed activity citations warrant a fine exceeding $5,000. But where there is egregiousness in the violations and that are significant, I believe the board should have the option to impose such discipline. Members, do you have any comments or questions on the draft language that's shown on the screen? And I would also recognize a motion should you have one.
Sure, sir. This is Song again. This one I would like to pursue. Motion again to recommend to the board as displayed on the slide.
This is Jig. I'll second that.
Thank you, Jig. Any other member comment? Okay, I think we're ready for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am opening up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Please do, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a motion on the floor and received no public comment, but I will now take a roll call vote. Jig Patel.
Yes.
Renee Barker.
Yes.
Indira Cameron Banks.
Yes.
Sung Oh.
Yes.
Ricardo Sanchez.
Yes.
And chair votes yes. Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 7, discussion and consideration of enrolled or recently signed legislation impacting the practice of pharmacy. Members, as indicated in the meeting materials, typically as a part of our October annual meeting, we consider recently signed legislation and discuss implementation. Detailed in the meeting materials are various measures that we'll be discussing. So let's take them one at a time, okay? The first one is AB 852, Healthcare Practitioners Electronic Prescribing. This measure was signed by the governor on October 25th, 2022. It makes several changes to the e-prescribing requirements in California. Changes include authority for pharmacies, pharmacists, and authorized practitioners to decline to dispense or furnish based on an electronic prescription submitted via software that does not meet specified requirements. The measure creates additional exemptions from electronic prescriptions as specified and exempts the prescription transfer requirement under specified conditions. In addition, it requires a prescriber to register with the board and state they meet one or more of the specified criteria for the exemption. Such registration is required on an annual basis. The meeting materials include staff recommendations for implementation. Implementation will include education of the changes as well as additional activities related to the online registration. Specifically related to the online registration, staff suggests that implementation be substantially similar to the online registration process used for the drug take-back locations or the board's health services registry. The staff propose that the online registry would include the prescriber's name, license number, email address, and the exemptions being claimed. Except for the email address, this information would be posted and available on the board's website. As annual registration is required, it is recommended, okay, let me say that again just to be clear because there's a lot of language in here. As annual registration is required, it is recommended that the annual registration occur consistent with the calendar year. The prescriber's email address will be used to facilitate the reminder. It is my understanding that both the medical board and the Board of Registered Nursing had advised our staff that they are comfortable with this implementation approach. The medical board has also recommended, if possible, a hyperlink to the prescriber's license lookup be included. Members, I'm comfortable with the approach offered and would appreciate any comments you have.
Just to note that I agree as well.
Great. Any other comments from members? If not, I think we're ready for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm opening up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and send it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, I'm seeing no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
On AB 852, I would like to request staff confirm with council that the board does not need to develop any regulations in this area. However, should regulations be required, can you please prepare draft language for our consideration at the next meeting? This would be helpful to help facilitate discussion and implementation. Staff, is that something you could help us with?
Happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're ready to move on to the next one. AB 2194, Pharmacist and Technician Continuing Education Cultural Competency. AB 2194 was approved by the governor on September 30th, 2022. This measure takes effect on January 1st, 2024. Pharmacists and pharmacy technicians must complete at least 1 hour course in cultural competency during the 2 years preceding the renewal application period. Further, the measure would prohibit the board from renewing a pharmacist or pharmacy technician license unless the individual has completed the course. Implementation for this measure will primarily involve developing a system for establishing a renewal process that includes continuing education requirements for pharmacy technicians. As a part of the implementation, the board will need to establish a records retention period. It appears appropriate to mirror the requirements for pharmacists and require maintenance of records for but to require pharmacy technicians mirror the requirements for pharmacists, which require maintenance of records for 4 years. In addition, staff suggests that implementation of provisions include amendments to existing CCR section 1732.5 to update the renewal requirements for pharmacists. As indicated in the meeting materials, the board previously recommended changes to the same section, 1732.5, to consolidate all CE-related requirements for pharmacists into a single regulation to assist pharmacists with compliance. Subsequent to that action, staff advised that this approach may not be appropriate. At that time, given this pending legislation, we recommended that the two issues be considered together when we discussed this bill. So now we're considering them together. So that's what the staff recommends, and I agree with the discussion that we should resume the larger policy goal to determine if any amendments to the section would be appropriate to further the board's policy that all continuing education requirements for pharmacists be together. Staff will also evaluate the potential to update online and system-generated renewal notices to determine if updates can be made in advance of the effective date. Education on the changes of the law will also be included in the board's newsletter, online resources, and board-provided CE on pharmacy law. Members, I agree with this implementation approach that we just discussed now, and it's detailed in the meeting materials. I would also suggest that implementations moving forward be developed by the licensing committee. So members, hearing all of this, I welcome your comments and including wanted to see if you agree with this concept going on to the licensing committee for implementation.
I agree, Maria. This is Jig, that it should go to licensing committee.
Thank you.
Hi,
Any
this is
other
Renee. I would also agree with going to the licensing committee as well as the, consolidation of all the CE requirements just for clarity.
Great, thank you. Hearing no other member comments, I think we're ready for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm opening up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand and we'll give you a moment.
Okay,
I don't see any requests. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
please, thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next signed legislation to consider is SB 731, Criminal Records Relief. Senate Bill 731 was approved by the governor on September 29th, 2022. As you may recall from prior discussions, this measure expands automatic relief to include arrest for felonies punishable by state prison. Further, the measure will expand automatic relief to certain criminal felonies committed after January 1st, 2005 under specified conditions. Implementation will require staff to review relief notifications to determine if any action is necessary. Staff will also work with the Attorney General's office to determine if any potential impact on pending matters. Members, do you have any comments or questions on this new legislation? Okay, I think we're ready for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll open up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, I see no request for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Please do, thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next item is Senate Bill 872. It'll come up momentarily. There it is. Pharmacies, mobile units. Senate Bill 872 was chaptered on August 29th, 2022. This measure allows a county, city, or a county, let me put this again, a county, a city and county, or specified hospital authority to operate a mobile unit as an extension of the pharmacy license held. The measure authorizes the mobile unit to dispense prescription medications as specified conditions and requires notification of the board 30 days prior to commencing use, as well as 30 days prior to discontinuing use of a mobile unit. I agree with the staff recommendation to develop standardized notification process. During the board's prior discussion of the measure, we noted that we needed to develop FAQs. The FAQs would include further direction on operational issues, including provisions for pharmacy breaks and lunches, security of the mobile unit during such periods, and the notification process. Members, while the development of these FAQs will be completed by the Communication and Public Education Committee, I believe it's appropriate for our committee to consider if we should suggest any additional areas of concern to be included in the FAQs. So if you think there should be additional things from the operational issues, in addition to pharmacy breaks, lunches, security, and the notification process, this is the time to make those recommendations so that the Communication and Public Education Committee can consider them in developing the FAQs. So members, do you have any comments?
Hi, Maria. This is Renee. Is it specified in terms of, the use of these mobile units, but for, drug storage or security while in use?
That's a good point. We could ask that be included in the FAQs to be clear. So security of drugs in the mobile unit while during hours of operation. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes, as well as just drug storage requirements maintained.
Storage and security. Okay, we can note that, thank you. Okay, seeing no other comment, I think we're ready for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm opening up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, and we have Stephen Gray wishing to make a comment. And Stephen, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. All right, Stephen, you should be able to unmute yourself. And Stephen, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with the comment that the security needs to be addressed, probably more than just the security while it's in operation. For an example, the issue of keys. Who's going to have keys to this mobile unit? Who's going to have those keys when the pharmacist, as was mentioned, goes to lunch and somebody can drive the mobile unit away, or someone can get into the drugs inside of it. So I think that security is probably the biggest concern about these. I believe the statute already requires that when the unit is not functioning for its mission, which is healthcare, the drugs have to be removed out of the mobile unit and put in storage. But there might be some issues there about security for the drugs when they're not in the mobile unit also that have to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. That issue is on the list to be considered from the previous board meeting, so thank you.
All right, I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Thank you, please do.
You're welcome.
So members, I look forward to reviewing the FAQs as developed by the Communication and Public Education Committee, so we'll be hearing about this soon. The next item is Senate Bill 988, Compassionate Act or Ryan's Law. Oh, Compassionate Access to Medical Cannabis Act. I was missing a lot of words there, that's important. Also known as Ryan's Law. SB 988 was approved by the governor on September 2nd, 2022. This measure repeals the problematic requirements that a hospital manage a terminal patient's personal use of medical cannabis in the same manner of Schedule 2 through 4 drugs. Implementation is straightforward and includes education on the changes of law in the board's newsletter, online resources, and board-provided CE on pharmacy law. So as I stated, this law signed to fix some of the problematic areas that were from a previous law. Members, do you have any comments or questions? I think we're ready for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm opening up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions, and we'll give you a moment.
Okay,
all right. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Please do, thank you.
You're welcome.
And the last item to consider is SB 1346, Surplus Medications Collection and Distribution. This bill was approved by the governor on September 30th. This measure, which is related to surplus medication collection and distribution programs, expands the entities that are eligible to donate medications to a county operating such a program. The measure also establishes pilot programs in specified counties to allow for the expansion of the county to run programs. The measure requires the board to evaluate the pilot program and to prepare a report to the legislature by January 1st, 2028. I believe the implementation activities detailed in the meeting materials are appropriate, including receiving updates on the staff's assessment of this program, assuming identified resources are received. I believe annual updates to the program would be appropriate for our committee, and that they should begin a part of the July 2024 committee meeting. This would provide staff an opportunity to secure resources and to begin the evaluation process. Also note that additional implementation would include education on the changes of law in the board's newsletter, online resources, and in the board's provided CE on pharmacy law. Members, I welcome your thoughts on the implementation plan and including the frequency on where we're requesting updates to monitor the implementation of pilot programs. Members, do you have any comments? I don't see any. Let's go to public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm opening up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on to item number 8, review and discussion of enforcement statistics. Attachment 5 includes enforcement statistics reflecting enforcement-related activities between July 1st and September 26, 2022. As indicated in the meeting materials, the board received 848 complaints during this period and closed 614 investigations. The board secured 2 interim suspension orders and 1 penal code 23 restriction. Also, as of September 26th, the board had 1,404 field investigations pending. The average days for various stages of the investigation are included in the meeting materials. Members, do you have any comments on the enforcement statistics? Seeing none, I think we're ready for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm opening up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment.
Okay.
Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Please do, thank you.
You're welcome.
Item number 9, future committee meeting dates. Before we adjourn today, I'd like to remind everyone that our October 19th committee meeting has been canceled. The meeting was originally scheduled in anticipation of USP releasing the finalized revised compounding chapters to allow us time to review and consider the revised chapter and an opportunity to determine what changes would be needed to our regulations. We will continue to monitor the updates from the USP, and we'll keep everyone apprised of the potential impacts to our committee's meeting schedule. The screen shows our scheduled dates for next year. With that, I think we can call for adjournment, a record, quick meeting. I appreciate everyone's time and staff and committee members for us allowing us to prepare for this meeting so that we could be efficiently use our time. Thank you, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you in the coming year, or actually at the next board meeting, but our committee will not be getting together until next year.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Chair Serpa.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.